Be inspired, supported, and empowered. This is the Global Healthy Living Foundation podcast network.
You can't understand it unless you've experienced it. It was very intense. I had to push myself to take care of my daughter, who just turned 3, and it just felt very stressful because there's a lot of mental health also included in this.
Welcome to Talking Head Pain, a podcast that confronts head pain head on. I'm Joe Koh, Director of Education and Digital Strategy at GHLF. I've lived with migraines for over 20 years, so I understand what it can do to your life. Today, I'm talking with Shruthi about the deep impact migraine can have on your emotional and mental health. Shruthi's discussion reminds us all of the systemic nature of migraine and how we need to address all areas of health when living with chronic disease. Welcome, Shruti. I'm so happy that you're on our show today. Looking forward to talking about migraine with you and learning about your experience.
Thank you so much, Joe. I'm so happy to be here, and I really appreciate all the work you guys have been doing.
So I'm reading that you run a Instagram page called Chronically Me. Can you tell me a little bit about that Instagram page and what inspired you to create it?
Frustration is what inspired me to create it. So I moved to Canada in October 2019, and you know how healthcare is over here. It's universal healthcare, so you have to wait a while to get your card, and it takes a while longer to see a doctor. So the weather change really aggravated my migraine condition, and I wasn't able to see a doctor. I wasn't able to see a specialist. My GP said it's not migraine, although I had been dealing with it for like nearly 20 years. And I couldn't find any help. So it was very frustrating. And for the first time in my life, I was able to find a support group. And that got me thinking that there are so many people out there who can relate to what I'm going through. And I felt so alone. So there must be more people out there who feel the same way I do. So maybe sharing my story and my frustration, just my life, would probably help at least one person feel a little less alone. And that's the reason why I started it.
It's really important. And I respect that so much because we have to build our own communities when we feel like we don't have one. Is that also why you created Migraine India?
Yes. Coming from India, migraine is not fully understood there. It's just a headache, something that women go through. Most neurologists do prescribe all these regular medications for migraine, but there's nothing more about it. I was never taught that we can actually take vitamins or, I had to include other management methods in my toolkit. So it was hard for me because I felt so alone in this all my life. Had people telling me that I exaggerate, that I'm trying to seek attention. And I really know how many people are actually suffering with this in India. And there's nothing. There is no association. There's no foundation. There's literally no awareness about it, which is why I created that page, just to get the conversation started.
How does it make you feel when people tell you that you're faking or you're just seeking attention?
I believed them initially because I was told that for a very long time. So my mother actually believed me when I said my head's aching, etc., etc. It started off with abdominal migraine, I believe, because I'd say my stomach's aching, I feel dizzy, I feel like throwing up. It was very confusing. And the doctor said, no, she's just faking it. She doesn't want to go to school. And I was at the top of my class. Why wouldn't I want to go to school? So my mother realized it's migraine when I had a lot of headaches, but she didn't say anything because she also went through it. And she really fought for me, advocated for me. But eventually doctors kept convincing her and my dad that it's not anything serious. And it took a very long time. So even through that, even after I was diagnosed, people just went on saying, no, you're just faking it. It can't be that bad. Don't try to get out of everything just because you have a headache. I did believe them. It affected my confidence. It affected my self-esteem, pretty much everything. So I went from being at the top of my class to not even bothering if I get through. I did get through because I'm super hard on myself, but I'm still trying to get over it.
So why is it that so many doctors don't take migraine seriously? I wanted to get some answers from a leading neurologist. So I sought out Dr. Peter McAllister. He's the director of the New England Center for Neurology. Dr. McAllister, for Shruti, we hear that many people like her don't get treatment or diagnosis for migraine due to doctors misdiagnosing them, or in her case, downplaying her symptoms as not serious, especially in her childhood. What kind of effects can that have on a patient and on the medical system as a whole later?
We have some reasonably strong evidence to suggest that early and proper treatment of migraine disease likely affects outcome later in life. If one has childhood migraine, and indeed 10% of school-aged children have migraine, ideally that would be diagnosed properly and the proper medications, lifestyle adjustments, sleep hygiene, etc., would be instituted. If not, what tends to happen with any medical condition that's not treated is it tends to worsen. And I've had children and teenagers who were not taken seriously by healthcare professionals who have gone from low frequency episodic migraine, a few a month, to a high frequency episodic migraine state and into chronic migraine. And as we know, chronic migraine is associated with much more comorbidities, anxiety, depression, you name it. So that is not a place you want to go. So I think like any medical condition, migraine needs to be recognized, not downplayed, treated properly, and the outcomes down the road will probably be a whole lot better.
I asked Shruthi to recall her worst migraine attack and describe what the pain was like at the time.
I remember this year, it was on February 8th. I had had migraine for quite some time. The attacks were going on, and I still couldn't get to see my specialist who I'd been waiting to see for over a year. And I was really frustrated. I tried to do everything possible. I tried to take all the medication that the GP had given me, nothing worked. And I ended up overdosing on pain meds. So I ended up in the hospital. That is the worst thing for me, to feel so powerless and so hopeless and to be in that situation. After which, the hospital sent me home with over-the-counter medication. That's it.
I wondered if this was the right approach to take. I asked Dr. McAllister why a provider would tell a patient with chronic migraine to take over-the-counter medications.
Over-the-counter medications, particularly the nonsteroidal anti-inflammatories and the ibuprofen or acetaminophen caffeine compounds, have limited utility in migraine. If you think of migraine as a brain disease, these are non-specific treatments. If one has one or two moderate severity migraines a month and Excedrin migraine or a few ibuprofen work, then that's fine. But the majority of patients, and certainly the ones I see here at my center, have more significant disease. Not only are over-the-counter medications generally ineffective, but if you take too many over-the-counter medications, it can lead to something called medication overuse headache, what we used to call rebound. The brain of a migraine sufferer gets very used to certain compounds quickly. And when you take enough of them, when you go to sleep at night and your blood level drops of that medication, you wake up with a headache and you say, what did I use? Oh yeah, Excedrin or Motrin. And you take it and you feel a bit better, but all you're doing is feeding the withdrawal and you're getting yourself into a terrible cycle. So sometimes I see patients in medication overuse. And while we do a lot of interventions, the first thing we do is get them off of the offending agents.
Shruti says her worst migraine attacks would leave her in a state of despair.
Feeling like I'd rather die, and I haven't said this before, I'd rather die than feel this pain, because nobody believed that it was that bad.
That's really sad and anger-inducing that you lived that experience.
Yeah.
You would rather die. That is something that we hear a lot from people that are living in pain and don't see an end to it. It's something that we have to really highlight as a reality for people with chronic disease, and that there's support. If people feel that way, call a suicide hotline. But can you talk a little bit more about what that felt like? Like, why did you get to that point and how?
I think it was a lot of things. So I'm here in Canada, away from my family. It's COVID, stuck with my husband. We didn't get to socialize. We didn't have much of a social circle. And it's just my husband and I. My husband didn't get migraine. I mean, he's never experienced it. He hears me talk about it, but you can't understand it unless you've experienced it. It was very intense. I had to push myself to take care of my daughter, who just turned 3. And it just felt very stressful because there's a lot of mental health also included in this. Feeling that hopelessness and despair and frustration and anxiety that comes along. And trying to be a mom and a wife and not fail at that and not feel like, oh my God, I didn't do the dishes today, so he's probably going to think I'm not good at this or I'm not being a good wife and things like that. And eventually it was actually the doctor who's supposed to be validating and helpful. And he ended up saying, no, I think it's just stress. I think you're just stressed. I can't refer you to this specialist. I can't refer you to that one. And I started feeling it. I've always had these thoughts. Every time my attacks get worse, I have suicidal thoughts. It's been there all my life. I've always managed it because it's obviously the brain trying to escape. But this time I recognized it. It got intense. I called all the hotlines. I was directed to IVR recordings. There was no human being on the other end of the line talking to me about it. I just felt incredibly hopeless. I don't remember much after that. I just woke up in the hospital the next day.
What would you tell someone that's feeling hopeless?
That they're never alone. That there's always at least one person out there in the world who feels it all. And just sharing that or reaching out and talking to them can actually help you feel a little less alone. And I think that the loneliness is what eats at us. Feeling like you're the only one who's dealing with this and acting like this and exaggerating, that is a lot to bear. So if the loneliness is taken out of this situation, it's easier to manage migraine. If the mental health part of it is balanced, you're able to cope, then you can deal with the pain.
And who is that person or organization or group that helped you feel not alone?
It's a Chronic Migraine Support Group Canada on Facebook. I have no idea how I stumbled upon it. I think I was just looking for something. I never even knew that there was support groups on migraine. I felt shocked looking at all the stories there on the feed because people keep posting whatever they're feeling. And the first story that day, I saw this lady who had said, I've been going through this for years. My doctor doesn't want to refer me to anybody else. I don't have anybody else. I don't have anyone in my life. So I went back to him and I said, can you please help me with physician-assisted suicide? And he gave me the number. For migraine, he actually said, we can't do anything else. So here's the number. And that really struck me because nobody should be in that position. And that is what helped me understand that there are so many other people feeling the same way I do.
Can you talk a little bit about how it is living in Canada with migraine? You spoke about the weather, but how have you found care in treating your migraine in Canada?
I think it's great that the government is offering us universal health insurance. I think not many countries do that, and this is great. But I'm not happy about the fact that I have to wait for a year and a half, several months to see a specialist if I'm really in need of help, just because I'm not emergent. I'm not happy that when I go to the ER, they send me back again with OTC. So that is something that I'm still struggling with. We have a lot of rules around healthcare. They cannot refer me to a doctor outside of this radius where I live. A lot of things that make it so difficult for you to go and get help when you want to. And this is not something I experienced in India. In India, it's completely different. Like I can walk into a clinic right now and demand help, and they will help because there are so many doctors. I understand the differences. But yeah, that's something I really miss. And I think that is what led to me feeling at my rock bottom. And it shouldn't really happen to anybody.
We agree. Can you talk a little bit about how migraine has affected your work life and working?
I have been a workaholic forever. I think I get that from my dad. I love working. I'm a content marketer. I used to love writing. I'd work 20, 21 hours a day, nonstop, and I loved it. I never really got tired. But then I'd work myself to burnout and end up with intractable attacks for months together. And so I'd have to take off time from work, sabbaticals, maybe switch jobs. And I switched about 8 or 9 jobs within 4 or 5 years, with breaks in between. And over time, it's just the pain, the anxiety, everything that comes along with it. I didn't really notice that my memory was fading, that I had brain fog, that I was actually struggling. And then when I did understand or when I did recognize the signs, it scared me so much that I completely lost my confidence. I am really good at what I do, but I felt like I was nothing. So I refused to go back to work. I was so happy that when I got married, I got to move to UAE. And over there, I was just not ready to go back to work. And then when I got back to India, I moved back because of the weather, migraine, just aggravated. I easily got a job and I stuck to it for 3 years, at the end of which I was still feeling all these things. I was still burning out, but I just held on for once because I really, really loved what I did. It was crowdfunding for healthcare. It was telling people stories, and that kept me going. And when I had to move here, I was more than happy to take a break. And I have to say this, I don't think I'm still ready to go back to work, which is terrible. I really worked hard to learn. I worked hard to do what I do. And right now, I feel like I suck at pretty much everything.
I would disagree because you just flipped that script. You're telling your story to help people as opposed to telling other people's stories to help people, which is a really powerful thing to do. And not everyone can or is willing to do that. So I would give yourself more credit.
Thank you. There's one part of the brain which says this, but the migraine side of it says, no, you know what? Just stop doing whatever you're doing. And I'm still not okay because it's social anxiety. A lot of things that I haven't been able to explain to anybody, just a whole lot of mental health combined. You feel tired all the time. How do you justify that? How do you explain that to someone? I look okay. I look fine. I don't look sick. I don't know what sick is supposed to look like, but I feel sick pretty much all the time. That is really hard to explain. For me, when I make a commitment to work, I want to fulfill it to 100%. And if I'm not able to do 100%, I quit that day. The day I realized that I can't. So I'm that kind of a person. Even with academics, I was pretty much like that. It was difficult for me, and it still is difficult for me because I know now that any moment today, I won't be able to give my 100%. I cannot make commitments. And so I don't want to commit.
Has that creeped into other parts of your life?
Every part of my life, especially motherhood. I didn't really think about migraine when I decided to have a child, which a lot of people do. I don't know why I didn't think about it. Maybe because I was in India and that time I was told that whatever I was feeling was normal. But after I had her, I've had that fear, maybe I can't commit to this. Maybe I'm not going to be a good mom. I'm probably not going to be a good wife. I can't tell you how many times these thoughts just plague me middle of the night. I'm just sitting up thinking, what will happen if I run away today? Because I don't think I'm making my husband happy. My parents are not happy. My child's probably going to grow up and hate me because I'm going to be in bed most of the time. Or I'm irritated and annoyed because mood disorder comes along with it. I get annoyed when there's a lot of noise, when people are moving around a lot, when people are eating. These are things people don't understand because they think, again, oh, you're just being irritated and you're just being too picky. You're just exaggerating again.
Shruthi is describing depression, a condition that's very common for migraine patients. Dr. McAllister is very open with his patients about how depression can affect their migraine and vice versa.
Depression can present as we all think of it, with sadness, tears, hopelessness, etc., but sometimes it presents quite atypically. And that can occur in men and women, but I found over the years that men can sometimes present in atypical ways, such as having irritability or mood changes or short-term memory difficulties or appetite change or sleep disruption. Sometimes once I hear that and I suspect it may be depression, then I go into education mode and tell them what they may be up against. And occasionally we firm up the diagnosis after we've treated it and they feel better. I find that I enjoy spending a great deal of time with patients, particularly on the first consult, and really get to know them. I get to know their lifestyles, their work habits. I ask about marriage. I ask about exercise. And it's just bundled into all of the things that one should ask in a very open and non-confrontational manner. And I get patients to open up and tell me things that perhaps other doctors may not, just by being conversational and non-judgmental.
I asked Shruthi if she's ever worked with a professional around mental health.
I have. I did even when I was a child. But at that time, it was not coupled with migraine. I've come to understand that my migraine comes from stress, which is actually from CPTSD, complex PTSD. And I'm still not able to work on that issue again because mental health is expensive here in Canada. It was easier for me in India, but at that time I didn't know. It was just depression and a little bit of anxiety and relationship issues, which I was working on. And I had to keep pausing my treatment because I had to move or go to college. But here, I think the only thing that's stopping me is the cost. It's incredibly expensive.
Seems to be the case in the States as well. It's really, really hard to get proper mental health treatment. Folks are inundated and it takes months and months to make appointments, let alone have insurance cover it. It's a challenge. So we relate to that. But it's good that you acknowledge it and that you know that it's there, and naming some of our challenges is the most important thing, and breaking some of that stigma around it. I think that we're taught to don't talk about mental health because people might judge us.
I don't think I ever heard people say it. I'm sure people said it, but with mental health, primarily because mental illness runs in my family, they're very prone to depression. People, generations going back, get triggered by something or the other. And that way we kind of mess with the future generations. I was always very much aware of the fact that something was not right within me, that I was not, I wouldn't say normal, that I was not like others, that I did not take issues just like others, that I had these very low moments, that I had these anxiety inducing moments for nothing. I could be walking on the street and hear an ambulance and go into a panic attack. No idea why. But I was aware of this and I consistently sought help for it. Because when I don't acknowledge it, I will end up in the hospital worse. That's what happened in February, where I acknowledged it. I did seek help for days, for weeks. And when I didn't get it, I lost it.
It's not easy to share that. Hopefully it'll help people that are listening to seek help, to talk about this, find the right person. You don't have to tell everyone. You can talk to a friend, you could find support online, you could try to work with a professional, all really positive things. My last question for you, how do you feel about diversity and representation in the migraine community?
Migraine treatment is focused on Caucasian population. I probably don't have much of a basis for this, but a lot of my friends from back home are in the US doing migraine research, which is very funny. None of them have migraine other than me, but I gather from them that a lot of the research and the subjects and everything is directed towards the Caucasian population. And I feel that the rest of us are underrepresented. For example, all this treatment that's available here, the alternative methods like alley lamp or the green light therapy or anything, right? TENS devices are not available in India. They're not available in countries where you have other races. You don't have that. Also, when it comes to diversity, I'd say that women are 3 times less likely to get medication when they go to the hospital for migraine. My husband went to the hospital with stomachache. He had kidney stones the first time, and then he had acidity the next time. They gave him morphine for both. I've been to the ER several times, and it takes a lot for me to go to the clinic. It takes a lot more for me to go to the ER. And they sent me home with over the counter. And I think it has to do with me being a woman and me exaggerating.
Do you feel that it's important to see Indian women represented in migraine stories? And is that something that you're working on?
Yes, I do. I'm trying to find them because none of them believe that they have migraine. The people who I have spoken to, they say that their families are not allowing them to go get a diagnosis because they think it's just a headache. You know, your grandmother had it, your mother had it, you have it, it's not a big deal. So I find it difficult to find Indian women to talk about this so that we can represent it correctly. But yeah, that's the case today. And I think that's something we have to work on fixing.
Was there anything that you would have wanted me to ask that I didn't ask you?
There's just a lot, like a whole life experience of it, which kind of hit me when I got here. That's when I first realized, yes, I do have this problem. My problem is valid. Everything that I'm feeling is connected to migraine, CPTSD or mental health and migraine, my personality changing and everything. It was a lot for me to digest. It is still a lot for me to process. And I'm still trying to figure out what I want to talk about and what else I need to bring awareness to. So discussing this with other people helps me process it better because it's taken me so many years to get to this point.
Well, I really appreciate your time and energy. And I know living with migraine and as a migraine patient myself, it's not easy to do a lot of these things, and we have to really budget our time and energy. So I appreciate that you budgeted time and energy for Talking Head Pain.
Thank you so much for this opportunity.
Thanks for listening to Talking Head Pain, a podcast that confronts head pain head on. Do you relate to Shruthi's story? If so, send us an email to talkingheadpain@ghlf.org. Or better yet, include a short video or audio clip. And who knows, whatever you share might be included in our future episodes. If you enjoyed this episode, give us a rating and write a review on Apple Podcasts. It'll help more people like you find us. I'm Joe Coe, and we'll see you next time. This season of Talking Head Pain is made possible with support from Amgen, sponsor of the Global Healthy Living Foundation.
Be inspired, supported, and empowered. This is the Global Healthy Living Foundation Podcast Network.